Hey guys, I want to tell you a story from when I was a kid. So I was going from sixth grade into seventh grade, and back then we didn't have middle school; we had junior high, and so junior high was just seventh and eighth grade. So naturally, there's this kind of apprehension when it comes to a new school with new kids. It wasn't just the kids from my elementary anymore. I was going to be merged with four or five different elementary schools students, and so there's that kind of nervousness that comes with that. And so this story takes place basically at the very beginning of the summer after sixth grade, so right when I was going into this new time in my life. I had this great group of friends. I had them, basically all of elementary school. We lived together, lived in the same neighborhood. We had a lot in common. We played sports. Right across the street from my house was this huge park, just a gigantic park with like a 2 mile walking loop around a huge lake. And there was this great field there. And on that field, we would play sports all the time. We played football. We played baseball. It just kind of depended on the day, whatever we felt like doing. And we were there pretty much every day. So this was kind of a different time in terms of parenting. And so I would eat breakfast and I would leave the house and I wouldn't come home until dinner or maybe later than dinner. And my parents, they didn't know or check on me. It's just how things were back then. So there were, all my best friends, and there was this kid in the neighborhood, and he lived two doors down and across the street from me, and his name was Mike O'Donnell. And we called him Mikey, and we didn't really like Mikey very much. He was a kid that we back then we called it picking on him, but now we would call it bullying, and it was horrible. I mean, we were really really terrible to this kid, and I look back on it, and it's embarrassing the things that we did and said to him. But anyway, Mikey always wanted to play whatever we were playing, whatever we were doing. He was all about it. It was just what he wanted to do, and so. Every day he would show up to Olander, to the park, and he would want to play whatever we were playing that day, and we would never let him. Until one day we were playing football, and a few of the guys saw him come in, and they were kind of like, "Hey, let's talk about letting Mikey play, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to let him play, and Raj, he's going to be on your team, and you're going to throw him the ball every time, and we're just going to let him catch it and then just hit him as hard as we possibly can. It's going to be awesome." And I was like, "Yeah, let's go." Why wouldn't we want to do this, right? Why wouldn't we want to do this? Of course. So we let Mikey play, and there's the way we always did it was there were two guys, myself and then a guy named Brian White, and we were always the all-time QBs, right for each team. We would draft teams, and so my team had one guy short that day, so Mikey got put on my team. So basically what happened was, we got the ball first. Mikey would run out, turn around, look for the ball, and basically the whole other team would just completely ignore their own receivers and their own guys, and they would stand 2-3 feet behind him, and I would throw him the ball, and whether he would catch it or not, usually he would drop it. The guys would, all of them, 7 of them, would just hit him as hard as they could and then drive him into the ground, and it was just this brutal, mean-spirited thing, and we did it, I don't know, kind of a bunch of times. But each time that we were doing it, I just, I started to feel bad for him. I mean, we were just really hitting him hard. So I really started to feel for Mikey, but everybody else was just having the time of their lives. And so we kept going over and over and over again, and until one time when we were going to get the other team scored, so we were going to get the ball back, and Brian was like, "Hey man, here's what we're going to do." So the way that the field was set up, as you can see in this picture, along the right side were a bunch of trees, and that was kind of out of bounds over there. And then half the field was at the top was nice and wide, and there was a creek there, and we just kind of didn't go near the creek, right? But when you got to the bottom half of the field, it really narrowed because there were these set of trees and a picnic table right on the corner. So it was a totally unsafe field. But luckily, never, nothing ever happened to anybody in that field. But the plan was, Brian was like, hey man, here's what we're going to do. You tell Mikey to run a crossing route across the field toward the picnic table. You throw it to him, and we're going to knock him into the picnic table. And so this was, this was a lot, right? Like, I mean, he could get legitimately injured. I mean, to the hospital kind of injured. And so I had already been growing more and more uncomfortable with this, throughout this process. But this was kind of the point where I was like, you know what? No, like, this isn't cool. And so I said that. I said, hey, B-Dub, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to, I'm out. And so just as quickly as they were willing to throw him into the picnic table, they were willing to throw our friendship away. And we had been friends for years. I mean, 5-6 years for most of these guys. And very, very quickly, they started running at me and running at Mikey, and they were ready to fight us. And so we did. I mean, it was like 13 guys versus us two. So we ran. We ran all the way to my house. So when we get in my house, we're huffing and puffing. We're exhausted from this sprint down, out to safety. They start running up and down the sidewalk. They start throwing things at the house, little sticks and stuff like that. My mom has to come out and yell at them and tell them to get out of there. And, it's crazy because those guys, I mean, I had been friends with them my whole life, basically. And most of them threw away our friendship just because of that one thing. They held that against me, and they lumped me in that same category as Mikey. And they did it for really the rest of the time that I knew them. So what's crazy about the timing of all of this is the summer after 6th grade, going into 7th grade. And, I was nervous already about being put in school with all those other kids. And all of a sudden, that first week, second week of summer, all of my friends, all of the guys that I hung out with were done with me. And, we played on this travel baseball team together where we played about 100 games every summer. And they ostracized me there as well. They wouldn't talk to me. When I would go up and hit, they would take my bag and throw it out of the dugout, or separate all my stuff, all my batting gloves and my glove, and they'd move it all around so that I couldn't find stuff in between innings. I mean, they were really, really terrible to me. I wish I could tell you that Mikey and I became, lifelong friends, and, we still talk to this day, but, it didn't really change how I felt about Mikey. I mean, I still wasn't particularly fond of him. I just also wasn't, too keen on the idea of injuring him on purpose. So I never really talked to Mikey much after that day, but it was something that I felt like was the right thing to do at the time. If we fast forward to high school, so 4 or 5 years later, those same guys, all of them, really started getting into some stuff that that they shouldn't have been in. I mean, they started getting into pretty heavy drugs, not just drinking or not just marijuana, but heavy drugs. They started doing heroin and things like that. Some of them, started selling drugs. Some of them really ended up getting in trouble. And when I think about, my life, I think about, how many hours I spent with those guys when we were kids. And I wonder what would have happened to me had I remained friends with them, had I remained in that friend group, had I remained hanging out with them. I really, really wonder if I would have ended up doing those things. I mean, you kind of are who you surround yourself with. And so at the time, that summer in particular, but even all of 7th grade, it was probably the darkest time of my life. It was really, really hard. It was not a fun time. But I look at, in the future, kind of what it saved me from, even if I wouldn't have gotten involved with those things. Just having to say, no to your friends like that is not an easy thing to do. And so I just think of the pain that it saved me from in the future. And so what's kind of crazy about this story is, even though it was really, really difficult, you just never know how things are going to impact you going forward. So that's my story. Thanks, guys.